Donkey Kong Bananza reviews are in, and the Super Mario Odyssey team at Nintendo looks to have kicked off the Switch 2 era with a certified masterpiece. Coming in at an overall Metacritic rating of a 91, Nintendo delivers to the Switch 2 one of the best games of the year and a 100% bona fide Game of the Year contender. What's up, everyone? This is Justin, and welcome to Just Keep Playing. Please join me today as we talk about the reviews for Donkey Kong Bananza and break down why it's a Metacritic must-play, coming in with an overall rating of a 91, and why it is one of the best games of the year. All right, so at the time of this recording, with 83 reviews, Donkey Kong Bananza is currently sitting at a 91. It started off the day at a 91, then it spent a good chunk of the time at a 90, and now it's settled back at a 91. And we'll see where it ends up overall, but looking at these reviews, it should end up somewhere in the 90s. Looking at the current reviews, Donkey Kong Bananza has 13 10 out of 10s. 9 in the high 90s, and that's anything 95 and above. And then in the low 90s, the 94 and below, it comes in with a whopping 43. So at the moment, that means that right now, Donkey Kong Bananza has at least 65 scores coming in at a 90 or above. And then that takes us to the 80s. And there are currently 7 scores in the high 80s, that's 85 and above, and 11 in the low 80s, 84 and below. And there are no mixed and no negative reviews at the moment. So that just lets you know that overall we have a really, really good game on our hands right now. But let's get to these reviews. Let's break it down. Let's see what these reviews are talking about when it comes to Donkey Kong Bananza. All right, so let's start things off with the 10 out of 10s. And I want to kick this off with the review from Gene Park of the Washington Post, where he starts off with some very, very big claims and high praise, talking about his review, where he says that, yes, I think Donkey Kong Bananza is a better game than Super Mario Odyssey. Now that to me already is like the highest praise that there can be. Super Mario Odyssey is probably my favorite 3D Mario game of all time. I absolutely love that game on the Switch. It is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. So for Gene Park, and not just him, but there are many other reviewers that have stated that they feel this is the best 3D platformer that Nintendo has ever made. So that right there just has me excited to get my hands on it and see for myself where it will rank for me compared to the very best that Nintendo has to offer. But he goes on to say it gives the most player agency in controlling the pace, challenge level, and collectible engagement. Puzzles never wear out their welcome, often broken up by action and fun exploration. He also goes on to say, and just trust there are no spoilers. There will be no spoilers in here, so you don't have to worry about that. He does mention the final act. He doesn't say anything that happens, so don't worry about any spoilers. But he does say that it all ends in the strongest final act in a Nintendo game in a long time, as well as a jam-packed and challenging post-game that will keep you playing long after the credits roll. Now that is saying a lot, to say that it has the strongest final act in a Nintendo game in a long time. I don't know, in my opinion, there have been some really good, some really amazing, really hype final acts in a lot of Nintendo's games from the original Switch era. Just off top, even Super Mario Odyssey, I absolutely loved the final act of that one, which I believe that a lot of that final act probably inspired some of the gameplay mechanics from Donkey Kong Bananza, and then Metroid Dread, that final act, that was like super hype. And then Tears of the Kingdom, that just came out like what, 2 years ago. That to me was the best final sequence, final act from any Zelda game and from almost any game that I've played in a long time. So if the final act of Donkey Kong Bananza ranks up there with those games, we are in for a treat with this game. He does mention some of the performance issues, which that is pretty much the biggest ding that most reviewers have with this game, and that's the performance issues. But he's on that. He talks about, he says, breaking apart Golden Rock may cause the game to stutter for microseconds due to the technical strain on the Switch 2, but quick performance hiccups never get in the way of the action, happening only during spectacular explosions outside of gameplay and while using the game's expansive map feature. And to highlight the level of Gene Park's 10 out of 10, he made this statement on Twitter in reference to the current Game of the Year race, Game of the Year battle that's going on. He says, "Sorry, Death Stranding and Clear Expedition 33. Kong is king of 2025 now, and the praise doesn't get much higher than that." Then from Inverse Gaming, Hayes Matson says that Donkey Kong Bananza is my favorite Nintendo platformer since Super Mario Sunshine. And he puts in parentheses, the best one. And I know Super Mario Sunshine, that might be probably the most controversial of the 3D Marios, but the people that really love that game, like they really love it. But he goes on to say, it's a game full of whimsy and joy, fantastic destruction mechanics, and tight design, a heartwarming story and friendship, truly something special. And that last part there, a heartwarming story and friendship, that is one of the aspects of the game that I am truly so looking forward to experiencing, and that is the relationship between Donkey Kong and Pauline. And I have said it many times, but Pauline must be protected at all costs. Finish up the 10 out of 10s before we get to the high 90s with Logan Plant from IGN that says the leader of the bunch is finally back to kick some tail in Donkey Kong Bananza, a brilliant successor to Super Mario Odyssey and a smashing return for a classic Nintendo character. It was a bold choice to build the Switch 2's first 3D platformer around Donkey Kong instead of Mario, and that was, everybody just knew there was going to be a 3D Mario to kick things off with the Switch 2, but Nintendo threw us for a curve and with giving us Donkey Kong. But I love what they're bringing. So, and I'm glad that the Mario team got to do something with a different character and be a little bit more creative, flex their creativity. But he goes on to say, it's proven to be the best decision Nintendo could have made. DK's satisfying, expressive movement and powerful dynamic abilities create a truly groundbreaking adventure. The ambitious, destructible layers of the underground world are densely packed with satisfying collectibles, abundant charm, and clever challenges that never seem to run out of smart ideas, even long after the credits have rolled. Bananza is a constant crescendo across its 20-hour campaign and beyond, with puzzle platforming concepts that only grow richer as DK and Pauline dive deeper toward the planet core. Every element comes together in complete harmony to create Nintendo's first Switch 2 masterpiece. So that's what the 10 out of 10s are saying. But where do you think Donkey Kong Bananza is going to rank for you? Is it going to be a 10 out of 10 for you? Let me know in the comments. While you're here, if you're enjoying this video, if you're excited for Donkey Kong Bananza, if you know it's going to be a 10 out of 10 in your heart, please hit that like and subscribe button as we continue to go over the rest of the exciting games that Nintendo has for us this year. All right, let's get to some of these high 90s. And coming in at a 97, we have Nintendo's, and they say with varied and very addictive gameplay, a tender story full of surprises, and an artistic section that combines wonderfully with a stunning soundtrack. Donkey Kong Bananza has become my game of the year, and I am convinced that it will delight every Nintendo Switch 2 player who has already spent enough time on Mario Kart World. And now that's a big piece there, you know. Mario Kart World, I still think it was the perfect game to launch the Switch 2 with, but now it was the perfect time for Donkey Kong to come swinging through, because now we were ready for that. All right, Mario Kart World, it's cool, it's fine, it's a lot of fun, it's really good, but what's next? And what's next is Donkey Kong Bananza. And speaking of music, the Donkey Kong series, especially Donkey Kong Country series, is definitely well known for having some of the best music in gaming, period. So talking about music, we got multiplayer.it coming in with a score of 95. And they say if Super Mario Odyssey were a music album, it would be a supreme high quality art pop record. Donkey Kong Bananza, on the other hand, leans more toward Baroque progressive rock, loud, layered, colorful, never afraid to dare, and push the genre's very boundaries. This is evident in the interaction that allows you to destroy almost everything, in the overflowing creativity of certain solutions, in the unexpected length of the adventure, in the difficulty of some final sections, climbing surfaces, smashing them, jumping and rolling, searching and uncovering treasures. It's all part of a unique and engaging experience. The game begins calmly, then builds continuously to a masterful conclusion. It is, in short, one of the best 3D platformers ever created, extremely respectful of the character's past, yet totally forward-thinking. For the game of the year, watch out for the gorilla. And then coming in with another 95 from Well Played, they say that Donkey Kong Bananza is a game so committed to its premise, you can't help but revel in the gorgeous, destructive genius of it all. Constantly building to a spectacular finish and incorporating the most comprehensive post-game experience I have seen in a Nintendo game to date. This is a proper benchmark of brilliance for what a first-party Switch 2 title should be. The world is your oyster, so why not punch it into pieces? See what they did there. And I really love hearing all of this about the post game in Donkey Kong Bananza. It's really good to know that after you beat the game, after you beat the story, that there still will be plenty for us to do to continue to just enjoy being in this world that they created and just enjoying that gameplay. I love the post game in Super Mario Odyssey. So hearing the high praise for Donkey Kong Bananza's post game is really exciting. All right, so now let's move on to the low 90s, and we'll kick things off with GameSpot that gave it a 90, and they say as part of the launch lineup for the Nintendo Switch 2, Donkey Kong Bananza, it nicely fills the gap for one of Nintendo's signature substantial single-player adventures. But more importantly, it's an excellent game in its own right and deserves to be mentioned alongside games like Mario Odyssey as among Nintendo's best recent work. And that point right there, early on where they say it fills the gap for one of Nintendo's signature substantial single-player adventures, that's what a lot of people's biggest beef with having Mario Kart World as the launch game was, is that it wasn't that big, meaty single-player adventure. But Mario Kart World, it was good to launch with it, but I was definitely very glad that Donkey Kong Bananza wasn't far behind, and that it came just a little over a month after the Switch 2's launch. GameSpot, they go on to highlight, they gave it a 90, which is a superb rating for them. They highlight the good, saying that the platforming moves with propulsive force, constantly pushing you to keep exploring. The Bananza forms feel powerful and nicely differentiate your power sets, acting as a Zelda-like tools. New layers and material interactions offer constant, delightful surprises. DK and Paulie's bond feels genuine and sweet, and it's just fun to punch through things. That part right there with that central gameplay mechanic of just being able to punch and destroy things, I can see that alone driving people to get so many hours in this game, because what better stress reliever could there be to come home after a long day or a stressful day or just whatever might be bothering you and just turn on some Donkey Kong Bananza and just start destroying some things and punching some things and letting off some steam that way. All right, but then they also go on and highlight the bad, some of the they talk about the performance issues, especially as things get more chaotic. The camera, as you destroy and continue just digging deeper and deeper and deeper, sometimes the camera can get a little wonky, and they say it doesn't know how to deal with punching holes through the environment sometimes. And then they also mention that the fossil currency for costume unlocks can be confusing. And then Game 8 with a 94, they state that what starts as a straightforward romp quickly reveals itself to be one of Nintendo's most creative and mechanically playful platformers in a long time. Donkey Kong Bananza's level design is smart, the gameplay mechanics even more so, and the sheer joy of controlled destruction never really gets old. Even with a few performance hiccups, again, that's like the main thing on this game, is that those performance hiccups with all the destruction. But even with that, in a main campaign that flies by quicker than expected, there's a ton to dig into here if you're willing to peel off its many layers. Pun very much intended. And then we have Vooks with a 90. And they say that it's not flawless, but what they've done here is take a character who's been out in the wild and bring Donkey Kong back home, with Nintendo putting its own stamp on DK in a fresh new way. Like Breath of the Wild and Odyssey, Nintendo has taken a cornerstone character, thrown out most of the rulebook, but kept the soul. Donkey Kong Bananza feels like a blueprint for DK's future and a reminder of how ambitious and richly designed Nintendo's games can be. Bananza is here now, though, and it's really something special. And I really want to highlight the part where it says that Donkey Kong Bananza feels like a blueprint for DK's future. That is a big thing. It's been, over 10 years since we got a brand new Donkey Kong game, and it's been since the Nintendo 64 era since we've seen a major 3D Donkey Kong game. So with them putting all of their might and effort into a brand new 3D Donkey Kong game like this, if this game is successful, which is already looking like it's going to be, where it's been constantly being the #1 game on Amazon in many countries, if this game is super successful, now you can finally add Donkey Kong's name to the list of Nintendo's major players along the lines of Link in Zelda, Mario, Pokemon, Animal Crossing, Splatoon. This game's success gives Nintendo another major game series now to add to their list and gives them that freedom to take their time with the next major 3D Mario. All right, so let's take a look at some of these high 80s, and starting things off with the New York Times coming in at an 86. They say that it's easy and generally a delight to get lost in the worlds of Donkey Kong Bananza in this lavishly animated extravaganza. Donkey Kong is the muscle that pounds, digs, and slaps like the Incredible Hulk in fur, oversized necktie, and ragged breeches. And I thought that from the very beginning when I saw this game. I was like, oh, okay, I see what they're doing here. Donkey Kong is getting his Incredible Hulk on, and I am here for it. All right, let's move on to juxvideo.com coming in at an 85, and they say Donkey Kong Bananza isn't the absolute masterpiece some were expecting. So they're definitely not agreeing with those 10 out of 10s that we went over earlier. But they say it's an excellent action-adventure game with effective, accessible gameplay and plenty of fresh ideas. It carves out a new direction for Donkey Kong without revolutionizing the formula, but with enough bananas, transformations, and discoveries to please a wide audience. A title with groove that hits the mark and hard, and that makes you want to come back again and again. And then we move on to Giga with an 85, and they say Donkey Kong Bananza impresses with its freedom, creative puzzles, and engaging mechanics, but its resemblance to Super Mario Odyssey and the lack of a truly groundbreaking element, which I'm not sure I don't know what they were missing there. I mean, the whole game is designed around being groundbreaking. And they continue to say that it keeps the lack of groundbreaking element keeps it from reaching the heights of Nintendo's most iconic games. So that is definitely in contrast to some of those others that have said that it is one of, if not the best, platformers that Nintendo has ever made. But what side of the fence do you think you're going to be on? Are you going to be team masterpiece? This is an amazing game, 10 out of 10 experience, or do you think it's just going to be just a really good game for you, but not quite the iconic game that you were hoping for? Let me know in the comments below. All right, let's take a look at some of these low 80s here, where they seem to highlight more of the issues that they have with the game. So let's see what they have to say. And we'll start with Dexerto coming in at an 80. They say from start to finish, Donkey Kong Bananza is a riot. I wrapped up my journey to Bananza's credits in a little over 20 hours. Your mileage will vary wildly depending on how much optional content you decide to invest time in. As for me, I'm going all in on all the optional content because I am like excited to sink my teeth into this game. But they go on to say that, but that's the beauty of it. If you're not big on collectathons, there's still plenty of game here for platforming purists to enjoy. I can't recommend enough taking on the various trials. Think shrines from Breath of the Wild, littered throughout the world, though especially if you're a fan of 2D Donkey Kong. While performance issues were largely non-existent in handheld mode, probably thanks to that VRR on the handheld mode, the quite severe frame rate drops were commonplace when docked, especially during certain boss battles. This doesn't take into account any day one patches that may or may not arrive on release and not egregious enough that your enjoyment will be hampered. So it seems like, some people may have been impacted more than others when it comes to the frame rates, but at the end of the day, the gameplay still shines through, and that those frame rate drops, those performance issues shouldn't overall impact your enjoyment of the game. And then we have VGC with an 80, where they say that falling slightly short of Odyssey's genius, Donkey Kong Bananza is still a thoroughly entertaining Switch 2 platformer with a heartfelt story and DK's most memorable adventure in years. And then the Gamer, again with an 80, they say that Donkey Kong Bananza is a fantastic platformer with a lot of ideas hidden inside of its barrels, but falls short of the perfection it aims for by playing a little safe. That one, I'm definitely, I'm gonna get my hands on it myself and see what I think. But from what I've seen, just it being a major DK game in and of itself, and now Mario, to me, that shows that they aren't playing it safe. So, but I don't know. We'll have to see for ourselves why they think that it was playing it safe. But they continue on saying that still, it's a great experience for Nintendo fans. I don't think its shadow will loom as large over the Switch 2 as Super Mario Odyssey did for the original console. It's just a good, honest video game, and sometimes that's enough. And that remains to be seen. But I believe that Donkey Kong Bonanza is going to last throughout the Switch 2 generation, where it will constantly be on list of the greatest Switch 2 games of all time, or top 10, top 15, top 20 Nintendo Switch 2 games. I'm pretty sure it's going to show up on those lists, so it's going to have a lasting impact. And then The Guardian with an 80, they also say that I'm not sure Bonanza has the same legs as Mario Odyssey, where that game blossomed in a rich post-credit endgame. DK lives more in the moment, moving ever forward, chewing through new ideas, and never stopping to pulverize the roses. And that's in direct opposition to a lot of what we heard earlier with those 10 out of 10s and those high 90s and low 90s, where they praise the post game as the best post game that Nintendo has ever done. So we'll see when we get our hands on it for ourselves how we feel about the post game. But yeah, they're not agreeing here. But he continues to say that come the game's epic climax, he has smashed through concrete, rubber, watermelon, ostrich eggs, entire Donkey Kong Country homages, glitter balls, even the NPCs he's trying to protect. If the weight of the Switch 2 does lie on his shoulders, that's just one more tool to bash in a hole in the universe. His appetite for destruction is infectious. So overall, the reviews for Donkey Kong Bonanza are really good, with not a single negative or mixed review at this time. It looks like Nintendo has delivered the game that the Switch 2 needed right now, and have given the Switch 2's launch lineup its first masterpiece. But what do you think? Are you excited for Donkey Kong Bonanza? Is it a 10? Is it going to be a 10 out of 10 for you? Or do you think that it's not going to quite live up to that masterpiece level of games like Super Mario Odyssey, Super Mario Galaxy, Super Mario 64? Let me know in the comments below. And to find out why I think that Donkey Kong Bonanza is the perfect game for the Switch 2 right now, check out this video right here. And until next time, I'll see you later. Have a good one. Peace.